As I said, it won't be anything to do with me, really. So, Leonie Orton Barnett, or Leonie Orton, or
Leonie Orton.
Leonie Orton. And I'm with Leonie. Oh yes, one other thing. I would ask you where we are roughly, but for privacy, I would guess you'd say North Norfolk rather than Overstrand. Is that fair? Leonie Orton in North Norfolk at her home. Leonie, please introduce yourself, and can you just describe roughly where we are and the environment where we're having the interview?
My name's Leonie Orton, and I am the sister of the writer Joe Orton, and I wrote a memoir in 2016 called I Had It In Me. I live now in North Norfolk, and the area around here is extremely beautiful. The beaches are wonderful beaches. Wonderful dog walking, especially in the winter when there's nobody else about.
Yeah, so how did you come to be in North Norfolk?
I came to North Norfolk in 2008. My partner John died in 2006, and at that time we were living in Leicester, where I was born, and I just was at the point of retiring and decided that I didn't want to retire and stay in Leicestershire, so I started to have a look round, and then read somewhere that Norfolk, or the east of England rather, is the driest county. Norfolk is the driest county, apparently. So I thought, well, I'll go out to North Norfolk and start looking round to see what I could buy, really. And I bought this place, and to be honest, I've never been happier. I'd never move back to the Midlands, never.
Lovely, thanks. Please, I won't respond verbally to lots of things because obviously they're trying to keep me out of cut these bids out. Do you want to talk a little bit more about your dogs? Because they are 3 whoppers and they are beautiful as well. And you obviously love your dogs.
I live here with my daughter and son-in-law, and we have 3 dogs between us. I have an Irish Terrier called Dora, and my daughter and son-in-law have 2 Weimaraners, Oscar and Luna, and we all get on well together.
Lovely, thank you. I'm going to move on to the book now. You've had a more than fascinating life, I'd say, and you've written a wonderfully funny and moving book about it. I Had It In Me. Can you just talk us through perhaps some tales of your early life, about your family and your upbringing?
The memoir I Had It In Me really does start with my mother, Elsie Orton, dying at the beginning of the book. She died in 1966 on her wedding anniversary, which was Boxing Day. The book opens, after the book's opening, I sort of decided that I'd go right back to my very early childhood, which there was 4 children. There was 4 of us. There was John, who later became Joe Orton, and then there was Douglas, and then there was Marilyn, my sister, and then me. So between Joe and myself, there's 11 years. We were living on a sprawling working class council housing estate in the middle of Leicester, which had a very famous long lane called Saffron Lane, and everyone that lives in that area refer to it as the Saff. And it was as bleak as you can imagine it could be. I mean, in the 1940s and early 50s, everyone I knew poverty was rife. I mean, I never knew what it was like to have a pair of shoes that didn't have huge holes in them, or socks, or even, we didn't have, I mean, okay, I suppose we must have had, my mother did put food on the table every day, but there was no luxuries whatsoever. We never had sweets or the only sort of anything that's sweet we had was usually things like sticks of rhubarb that we dipped in little bags of sugar or something like that. Or we'd scrump apples and plums and whatever we could pinch we'd have, It was bleak, it was awful. I never look back on my childhood and think, oh, that was lovely, or I really enjoyed that time, or oh, God, no, it was like Hell's Kitchen.
Can you tell me a bit more about, it wasn't a particularly happy relationship between your parents and Bill and Elsie, so perhaps a little bit about that.
Yeah, my parents, Bill and Elsie Orton, were, I mean, in all fairness, they were hard working. They both went out to work. My dad was a municipal gardener and my mother was a charlady. But there was so much friction. My mother loved to go to the pub, so every night if she had a few bob in her pocket, she'd go down the pub. Consequently, we were left very much to our own devices during the day and in the evening. Education was not considered important, although she did send John because I assume because he did suffer very badly from asthma as a child. And she couldn't imagine he'd ever be able to do any hard physical work. So she sent him to it wasn't an educational college, it was a secretarial college, where the teacher was astounded at how much he didn't know. In fact, we have a quote from her. Her name was Miss Bish. And we have a quote from her saying that he could hardly string a sentence together. I don't believe he wrote these plays.
Really? Do you think family life was symptomatic of the time, or do you think it was particularly unpleasant in your... Do you think your family life was symptomatic of the area of the time, or do you think yours was particularly unpleasant?
Our family life was slightly different, I believe, or I always see it as slightly different, in so much as most of the kids would be afraid of their fathers. I know that old saying, you wait till your dad gets home. No, in our house, it was more, you wait till your mother gets home. My father was a very meek and mild-mannered man. He wouldn't take my mother on at all. I mean, she'd shout at him and she'd be a harridan, but he never, ever retaliated. He used to turn round, walk away and go into his garden. And then she'd shout at him through the window, yeah, go on, get out of my way. And so we were witness to all this. Consequently, the boys had no father figure, really. They had a poor role model, really. Not that I advocate that being a strong and I don't know, and beating your kids is right. It isn't, but it's just that our father was incredibly, weak, and but the one thing for me and my sister is that our mother was cruel. She'd beat us, and our father never ever stopped her once. Never once did he say lay off of the kids or leave them alone or anything. So in that respect, I think that we were different. Our mother was, the boss in that household. And by God, we were frightened of her. We really were frightened of her. I mean, she hit my sister once on the head with a fire poker. And her teacher was appalled when Marilyn said, my mum hit me on the head with the poker, miss. That's why my head's bleeding. She hit me on the head with the poker.
Would you describe it as a loving relationship? My mother and father, a loving relationship between the family. Between each other and how they felt for the children. Was it a loving environment? Did you feel loved despite unpleasantness?
Never in all my life have I ever felt loved by my parents. My father was a little less, but my father was just complacent. He never. If I ask him to help me with my spellings or my arithmetic, he'd just look through you as if you were a piece of glass. I mean, there was no love at all. I mean, I never knew my mother once to kiss me, hold my hand, put her arm round me, sit me on her knee. Never, ever. I never knew any emotional contact with my mother at all.
One more question on that, because I realise it's a difficult subject, but did you ever put your finger on why your mother was like that?
I assume that my mother was this fairly brutal, tragic figure, really, in so much as I think that she had ambitions herself. She always said she wanted to be an opera singer. And she'd sing to anybody. She'd sing in the pub in the evenings. She'd sing at a drop of a hat, as they say. I think that she was possibly frustrated. She was unhappy with her lot, and rightly so. I mean, there were no opportunities for women in the 1920s and 30s. Well, especially not for lower working class women like my mother. I mean, so, yeah, I suppose a lot of it is born out of anger, frustration, and, having ambition, but no way of channeling it. And it was ever thus for women, I think. I mean, if you were a man, you stood a little bit, you had a few more opportunities, but women didn't have any opportunities. Not then, anyway. Not if you were of a certain class.
That's excellent. It's very sad, I have to say. It's very sad. This all comes out in the book, and it's quite a tragic tale in many ways, but there are some happy endings. I just wanted, from a point of view, just to put some colour on it from a point of view of memories. Were there any hobbies or a favourite toy or a book or TV programmes, or as you grew older into your teens?
Oh, in my teens, yeah.
Yes.
I think as I grew older, as I grew and reached my teenage years, we did acquire a television. I do remember them having a television. That's when and I really the only thing I really enjoyed at school was drama, was the drama sessions, was play reading. I wasn't a very bright kid. I mean, I didn't do well at school. All four of the Orton children all failed their 11 plus. Consequently, I went to a secondary modern school, and in the 1940s, late 40s and 50s, secondary modern schools, you were excluded from all examinations, so there was no chance. If you didn't go to a grammar school, you couldn't take O-levels, or the equivalent of GCSEs now. And so opportunities were so rare for girls. You know, it was either factory work or office work. I mean, the thing I enjoyed a lot then when I left school with my mates, we'd go dancing down the local Palais de Dance, and we'd go to anywhere that had music playing. We'd go in and there'd be dancing and smoking and cigarettes, tobacco I might add, and just you know, the mixing of the sexes of girls and boys were, you know, I mean, I seemed to be happy then. I was happier than, as long as I was out the house, away from her, my mother, I was happy, or happier. I never thought about ambition. I never had any ambition as such. My aspirations were really, really low. I never thought I'd get out of factory work. And in fact, until Joe died, I was still in a factory, overlooking.
There's a wonderful phrase in your book. It's 4 words. I can't remember. It was something to do with seam sewing, but there's a lovely 4-word phrase about, and that was lovely. I can't remember, but anyway, just going on to that. So it was about this time that you met George, is it?
Yeah. Yes. I went on a Saturday night. If you didn't have you always met your boyfriends on Saturday night. The weekdays were reserved for your girlfriends. Saturday night was reserved for your boyfriends. And on this particular Saturday night, I didn't have a boyfriend, and my sister was going to a 21st birthday party. Now, given that I was 16, I thought a 21st birthday party seemed eons away to me. It seemed just way in the future. But anyway, I had nothing else better to do, so I went along with my sister to this 21st birthday party. And unfortunately, I met my future husband, George Barnett. You know, don't tell me that life's not full of regrets, but I really regret marrying George Barnett. Not that he was a bad man. He was not. But we were like worlds apart. He loved all forms of sport. If it had a ball in it, he'd watch it. Where I just wasn't. I'd sooner stick needles in my eyes and watched football, and still feel the same today. So no, it was just the wrong move. But you know, there's a wonderful saying that I use quite frequently, and it is that it took me a long time to realise. I mean, it was always cool and a bit frosty, if you like, but it took me a long time to realise it was snowing. So, you know, in the end, I left him.
I have to say that I'm sure there's a phrase, there's a few paragraphs early in the book where you describe the breakdown of that, or the realisation that it was over. And I was reading through it, and I kept showing it to my partner Deb and saying, "That's your friend." And I'm sure there was a million wives across who. It's the lack of sort of respect, or it's almost like you just.
Is that my phone?
I believe so. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Just let me check. I think it might be.
Oh yes, please do. I'll just pause that.
It's Stand a Misery Memoir.
No, I mean, it's a very joyful memoir in many ways, because there's joy in unpleasant circumstances. I mean, going back, you've got obviously the photos in the middle, which I identify with hugely, because the clothes are the same as my parents. The window on the house behind you is, we lived in a house like that, and the two children with the pudding basin haircuts, that's exactly the same. But the funny one was there's a picture of you on a beach with your first husband your husband George, and the title at the so this is us having an argument on a beach. And I thought you must go through picking out all the photos and think, right, that's the one.
My publisher, the photo in the book where I'm actually, we're in Malta, and I'm arguing with George, and which wasn't infrequent. And my publisher really didn't want me to include that picture. She said, no, we can't have you just argue, We don't want. I said, no, but that was so us at the time, and yet you don't want to include the real me. It was all, and so I wanted that photo, and I fought to keep that photo in the book. And I'm glad I did, because lots of people do comment that it's funny that, I don't know, another memoir or biography showing the couple actually having an argument.
Like real life. We did talk on the phone. You said that it was very important to you that it was a real biography, autobiography.
Yeah, this memoir, to me, has been a long time coming. In 1978, I met John Law and his then wife, who unfortunately now is dead, and he was starting to take notes and recordings for his book, Prick Up Your Ears. And when the book was published and I read it, I was absolutely in bits. I remember sitting on the settee and just crying, because I was crying for myself. I was crying that I knew so very little about this Joe Orton, and yet here was a man from California, John Law, who wrote the biography. It was a man from California, and I couldn't help but think, what does a Californian know about British or English culture? And yet there it all was, all his ideas, and very well written. When I say I thought, it just seemed to hang together so well, that his book, and I was sort of so sad that how could he know my brother better than I knew him, and it festered away in me, this idea that I wanted to tell my story about Joe too. When Joe was murdered by Kenneth Halliwell in 1967, the family did not know that they were homosexuals. We didn't know until after Joe's death that they were. We didn't use the word gay then, we used the word queer. And I didn't know that they were gay. We were so naive. It's incredibly naive about that type of thing. My mother was you couldn't mention even the words knickers in our house. My mother used to go in the bath with her knickers on. She was such a prude, unbelievable. You were terrified of taking all your clothes off near her, because she'd go absolutely mad at you.
We touched on Joe's death there. Really, if we just wind that back a bit about your relationship with him as a child, then moving forward with Joe leaving and moving on, going to RADA, London, Kenneth, and the library, prison, all those things. If we could just run through that sort of thing back up to the event.
The death.
Yeah. Take as long as you like over that stuff. It's just for people who maybe don't know the story. From you used to go and see him in London. He used to come back to Leicester.
Do you want me to start with RADA then?
Yes, really. Him leaving home, going to that,
yeah,
and then going through. I'm sorry about this, but this.
No.
This is very
You can edit it, can't you?
They will edit it. I don't have control over
No,
that.
no, but they will. Yeah, I'm sure they won't want all this.
So yes.
Yes. I think it was 1953 or 52 when John won a scholarship to go to RADA. And he left home. I remember distinctly him leaving home with his little brown suitcase, walking down the road, and my mother saying, "That's it. He'll never come home again. I know he'll never come home again." Which I felt then, even as a small child, very sad. I couldn't have been more 5 or 6, but some memories do stick in. They're very significant moments, I think. I was very fond of my brother John, very fond of him. And then when he went to, after he did 2 years at RADA, and then whilst at RADA, he met Kenneth Halliwell, who he eventually went to live with. I used to write to him when he was in London. My mother wrote occasionally. In fact, there's a lovely letter in the Leicester the Orton archive material is housed in at the Leicester University in their special collections department. And there's a lovely letter from John, or he wasn't a Joe then, from John, saying, replying to a letter that my mother had obviously sent him. And he starts the letter by saying, "Dear Granny Doom, I thought you were allergic to pen and paper." And so that was, very funny. And then there's a lovely letter also in the archive where my dad had obviously wrote him a letter, and my dad had pointed out something to the effect that the strong winds that had occurred had bashed down all his dahlias in the garden, and he was full of remorse over this. And John wrote back to him saying, "I know we've had very high winds here too in London. I was walking in Regent's Park the other day, and I saw a nun get blown up a tree." Well, I mean, it was absolutely hilarious. And yet they debated whether this could be true or not. So after, and by this time, of course, he was then living in London with Kenneth Halliwell. And Halliwell had come from this sort of middle-class family, an only child. His father was chief accountant at Cameron Lard, on the shipbuilders. And his mother just was a housewife and stopped at home and looked after Kenneth and doted on him. He was Oxbridge material. He was ready to go to one of the great British universities, and his mother then died very suddenly on holiday when a wasp stung her in the mouth, and she died of an anaphylactic shock in front of him. I think he was about 13. And then, a few years later, he came downstairs one one morning, and he's found his father dead with his head in the gas oven. And after that, I mean, he never, he didn't continue with his education. Well, not in a formal sense. He applied to RADA. And whereas Joe, because he was talented, got a grant from the Leicestershire City Council, or he couldn't have afforded to go. Kenneth, on his application, it says who pays for the cause, and Kenneth has put self. So, and after that, after they met at RADA, from the early diary, you do get the impression that Joe really wasn't that mad keen on Kenneth.
Sorry, can we just say at this point that Joe would start to keep a diary and we can go all the way through?
Yeah.
Just before we go into I'm conscious that you're coughing. Would you like
Always.
a drink or something?
No, I'm all right. I'm
you
always
sure?
like this, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So, Joe had always kept a diary. I mean, I have the 1949 only copies, unfortunately, of the 1990, of the 1949 diary. So it always sort of done quite a bit of scribbling. And so when he and Kenneth got together, in his I think it must be his 1950s, late 1950s, he was writing that Ken has offered to share a flat, and I've said no. And then a bit later on it said Ken offered again for the flat sharing, and I said no again. And then a bit further on it says something like, going to move in with Ken. I'm afraid I have to. So one gets the idea that if he'd have had the cash, or if he'd have had the financial support from somewhere, that Joe would probably have liked his own place. But in any case, he moved in with Kenneth, and then he writes in his diary, well, and then the next day, well, exclamation mark. The next day, well, and exclamation mark. And then the last entry is, the rest is silence. So obviously, Joe was introduced, I think then, personally, to homosexuality. And, I think he obviously quite enjoyed it. So, that was it, really. And then they were learning together, and Ken was educated. Ken knew his Greeks from his Romans, and Ken, they'd go to the library and they had a very monkish existence. They'd sort of go to bed when it got dusk, and they'd get up when it got light to save on electricity, and they'd eat things like rice and treacle and bits of fish and that they could get. They lived so frugally. It takes some believing. And so when I do read the occasional report from somewhere or other that I knew Joe Orton, we used to meet in the pub. We'd go down the Anchor pub or wherever. And I don't think Hugh did, Joe didn't like booze. I never drank. He did smoke marijuana. And he sort of took marijuana, he baked it in Mary Baker products. But I never saw him smoke. And he did take Librium, and he did take Valium to stimulate him. But as far as booze was concerned, he didn't booze. Joe did not drink.
Well, were they a homebody couple? Because it was quite a small flat, very flat in Knoll Road, where it's quite a sense of claustrophobia about it when you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a bed where they lived. I mean, I went to the flat several times. It was a bed sit. There were 2 divan beds either side of the room, and then the back wall was just covered, floor to ceiling, with art prints that they'd stolen out of library books, of art books, and it was, the whole wall was a huge collage of all these Renaissance artists, and then you'd see a bit of Picasso, a bit of Magritte, and a bit further on there'd be a Miro or something like that. It was all sort of merged, and it was amazing, really. It was amazing. But Kenneth Tranham, the actor, had a wonderful way of describing this. He said it was just noise for the eyes, and it was in many ways. But it was wonderful to you. There was Michelangelo's Pietà, and then Michelangelo's David, which would loom out at you, and then underneath the huge statue of David, there'd be some sort of Madonna peering up at his genitalia. And it was just hilarious. It was wonderful. I thought it was wonderful, I did. But, I do have a picture of it. And there was also a wonderful book that came out 2 or 3 years ago now, called Malicious Damage. And it was this, of course, I didn't know, but all this stuff that were plastered on their walls were all to do with the fact that they were going into the Islington Library and taking books out officially and unofficially. Unofficially, of course, they were being secreted into his satchel or into his coat pocket. And then when they got home, they'd cut the art plates out and then take the books back. But also, they were defacing library books. They'd do things like there's a wonderful one of a picture of John Benjamin, the poet, had been taken off the front cover, and there was a tattooed man, tattooed from head to toe with just his swimming trunks on. And that supposedly was John Benjamin. I mean, it was just hilarious. I love them. And if anybody's really interested, you should go down to the History Library in Islington and request to see the book covers that they defaced, Joe and Kenneth defaced. I think if you make an appointment, they'd love to show you them. They really are one of their prized possessions. And he'd do all sorts of things. He'd do blurbs inside the books, and so when you read it, you'd think you were going to get this really big, thrilling thing. And of course, the book was nothing like the blurb at all. But no, and of course supposedly for this, they were eventually caught and sentenced to 6 months in prison. And of course, now I realise, and then of course, that they didn't really get sent to prison for defacing library books. I think it had much more to do with the fact that the magistrate who sentenced, or whoever it was that sentenced them, could see that they were homosexual and that they needed putting away. And so, but of course, Joe and Kenneth would never have admitted they were, because, I mean, homosexuality then was still illegal, and they'd have got all this dreadful treatment, trying to rehabilitate them, so they'd never admitted that they were homosexual. But after they came out, whilst in prison though, I think Kenneth had a really bad, well, I know Kenneth had a really bad time, because he tried to commit suicide. What a pity he didn't succeed then. But anyway, he tried to commit suicide, and he clearly was having the most awful time. Whereas Joe, you see, the problem is with all that is that Kenneth was not streetwise like Joe was. Joe had had a bloody hard upbringing. He says himself, "I'm from the gutter, and don't you ever forget it, because I won't." And Kenneth was not from the gutter at all, and quite the reverse sort of upbringing. Socialisation was totally different. And whereas being in prison really affected Kenneth, he'd become a criminal almost, whereas Joe really didn't give a toss. The point is, I think, is that, Kenneth had no idea. I don't think Kenneth really had an idea what poverty was, where Joe did. I mean, living the early life that Kenneth was living, I should think he knew as much about poverty as Prince Charles does. But you see, Joe was used to all that sort of misery and striving, and so in prison, it gave him time. He didn't have to go to work, did he? I mean, it gave him time to write and to think more and more. And the isolation periods, he said, were interesting, because it put a lot of effort into thought. And he says himself that whilst I was in prison, the scales fell from my eyes, and it didn't matter anymore. I didn't care anymore. And it brought detachment to my writing. And of course, when he came out of prison, or whilst he was in the prison for the latter part, I mean, I know that he'd started to write his first radio play, Ruffin on the Stair. It wasn't called that then. He'd got an earlier draft called The Boy Hairdresser. But anyway, later it was renamed Ruffin on the Stair. And it came out, and he sent it to the BBC. And John Tiedemann, who was part of the BBC sort of selection committee then, who I think now lives in Norfolk himself. And he picked it up. It had been rejected by a panel, as he says, quote, of old ladies, established conservative older ladies. He says, and then it was passed to me to throw it on the scrap heap. He says, and I read it, and straight away I just knew this was completely different. This was talent. It was raw, but it was talent. And so he asked to see Joe, and Joe went in, and he said to Joe, have you got any more plays like this? And he says, well, I am writing one at the moment. He said, but it's not for the radio. He said, it's for the stage. And he said, oh, well, if it's for the stage, you'll need an agent, John Tiedemann said to him. So I suggest, if she'll take you, the best agent, London agent you could possibly find is Peggy Ramsey. So you go and see her and tell her John Tiedemann sent you, and I've accepted your play for the afternoon slot. And so off Joe went, and he took his play then, which was Entertaining Mr. Sloane. And apparently, there's this lovely story whereby when he got there, she wasn't there. She was out at lunch, and he left it with her secretary. And the secretary did say to him, "I doubt whether she'll look at it because she's not taking on any new clients at the moment." But knowing that Peggy was really keen on writers that had been accepted by the BBC, she decided that she'd have a look at this play. And she said, and I went into my office and shut the door. And within 15 minutes, she said, I was howling with laughter, and I knew I'd found a completely new talent. This boy had talent, she knew that. And so that's how it all sort of panned out. And then after that, of course, after Entertaining Mr. Sloane, he wrote Loot, which was a disaster for a start. But then it was a disaster because Kenneth Williams played the lead Inspector Truscott in it. And it was totally wrong. Joe knew it was wrong putting a comedian in to play Truscott, because the most important thing about Joe's plays is I think that you do have to play them absolutely straight. They're not the drop your trousers Whitehall farces. They are really, it's serious theatre cloaked in this wonderful farce genre. So really, he took off, and then he'd just finished writing What the Butler Saw when Kenneth just went completely mad on the evening of August the 9th and murdered him. And then he killed himself directly afterwards with 22 Nembutal sleeping tablets. And the next day, a chauffeur was due to pick Joe up to meet the Beatles manager, Brian Epstein, because Joe had started writing this film for the Beatles. And he couldn't get in. He couldn't make them hear. And in the end, he looked through the letterbox and he could see this bald-headed man, naked, laying on across the floor. And he just rang the police and Peggy Ramsey, and then Peggy Ramsey went round and saw the damage that had been done, and of course Joe didn't even tell her, I don't think, that he had a family, because she didn't know he had a family. And that very evening, or the next evening, I was nursing my 3-month-old first child, baby, and it came on the television. And that's the first we knew about it. I saw these 2 black coffins being taken out of their flat in Islington and put into the back of this van. And I was just astounded. I couldn't believe it. I shouted at my husband and said, Joe's dead. It says that Joe and Kenneth are dead. And he said, no. He says, it can't be. They let the family know first. And I said, I'm telling you, it was Joe and Kenneth. And then, of course, my brother came round, Douglas, and said he'd rang the Leicestershire police and they'd put him in touch with the Islington police station. And it was confirmed that that one man had been bludgeoned to death and another man had died of an overdose, they're assuming, of tablets or something. He was dead at the scene. They were both dead at the scene. And that could a member of the family go down and identify Joe? Which subsequently my brother went down. And so it began, really.
What about the note at the scene?
Yeah, and also Kenneth went, when Kenneth must have been contemplating what he was going to do, I think, because after he'd killed Joe, he left a note on the top of Joe's diary saying that if you read his diaries, all will be explained. And a very strange PS, especially the latter part. I just feel that you must have some sense of what you're doing if you can leave a PS. Well, I just see it. I mean, I have no feelings towards Kenneth at all, really. I mean, I just feel that, you know, he murdered a dearly beloved brother, and out of an act of gross selfishness. And if anybody says, do you forgive him? The answer, my dear, is no. No.
Did you meet him? What sort of person did he come across as?
Kenneth Halliwell was sort of this very reluctant... He reminded me a little bit, strangely enough, of this weak character again. Not that he was anything like my father, because he wasn't, but sort of... It wasn't weak, Kenneth wasn't, but I think Kenneth was always terrified of being found out that he was queer. And sort of, he never spoke really to me very much at all. I mean, when we went out, and I went down with Joe and Kenneth to see Entertaining Mr. Sloan at the New Arts Theatre Club. I mean, he'd sit right on the edge of his seat and he'd be this sort of totally enclosed capsule, if you like, within himself. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't like that with Joe, but I just think that he was... he saw that I was naive and just a kid, really. 18, 19, you know, 20, I was just as green as grass. And I thought that maybe he didn't converse with me because he didn't know what to ask me or talk to me about. But he was, I mean, listening to other people, especially people in the theatre, I mean, he was despised by so many people. Just this arrogant sort of chap that would sit in the theatre while the play was being rehearsed, and the director would be asking Joe questions about so and so, or an actor, the way that an actor was performing the role, and Kenneth would be shouting out instructions about our play. And you know, and one director just says, don't ever bring him here again. I do not want him in this theatre. He is really disruptive and upsets the cast. So, you know, so he wasn't this person that I saw him as. He was much more sort of, I mean, you know, and he was pathetic in some ways. Ken Cranham talks about one evening when he came to the theatre without Joe to see when Luke was on stage, and he was sort of really pathetic and saying, "I thought of the title Lute," and Joe will never gives me any credit for anything I do, and Kenneth Cranham was saying, you know, he was so dour and so sort of, oh, please get me away from this man. He was so depressingly boring in many ways, and which is, you know, I don't think Joe saw him like that. I mean, he clearly did a lot for Joe. I mean, he clearly was his mentor, and he taught him an awful lot. But then I do think they taught each other a lot as well. And the idea that Joe was this really uneducated pip that came from Leicester in the 1950s, it's not strictly true. By then he'd been on the stage in a lot of amateur productions. He'd read the complete works of Shakespeare. He was always reading. It always had a book in his hands. And so I don't really believe that the idea that, you know, Kenneth was this Phantom of the Opera figure, you know, that Svengali that breathed life into this, you know, this person. I just think that they worked together, and I think Kenneth, you know, as Peggy Ramsey said, sadly fell behind. And when Joe took off with his writing and people wanted to be with him, Joe was at the best time of his life. You know, just at the very peak, coming towards the peak of his career. I mean, I don't know how many more plays he would have written. I mean, even Pinter, didn't he? I mean, he stopped after a bit. I mean, I think Joe says himself, you only have so much inspiration. But, I mean, clearly he was at the top of his game, or coming towards the top of his game. And sadly, you know, he took him out then, which was tremendously sad. I mean, tremendously sad for me, but also tremendously annoying and sad for the theatre. Because, you know, when Entertaining Mr. Sloane was first being cast, Joe was really keen on John Hurt playing the title lead of Sloane, and I don't know whether John Hurt was ever approached, but he liked John Hurt's work a lot. I don't know what John Hurt had I don't know what he'd seen him in or how he knew of him, but yeah, he liked John Hurt's work a lot. And I think that John Hurt would have probably liked Joe a lot too. But no, and then of course after the death.
Sorry, it's a sensitive point, but just for the terms of it's okay just to ask a couple of things about Joe, because we've got quite a lot of character about Kenneth, but Joe's still a bit of an enigma. I imagine he was less brooding than Ken, a lot more vivacious.
Oh yes, he was.
What was Joe like, really?
Oh, I think that whilst Kenneth was this fairly morose character, I always saw him as, Joe was the absolute opposite. He was, when Joe walked in the room, you know, the smiles broadened. I mean, he was such. I mean, people listening to this will say, "Oh, she's bound to be biased," and of course I'm biased. But I mean, don't just listen to me. Listen to anyone that knew him, and they all say the same. You know, he was such a young, enthusiastic, and he knew where he was going. He was happy with his life, you know. He was beginning to becoming happy with his lot and happy with his life, and I think that it showed, you know. I mean, even just it was never boring or miserable to be around. I mean, even as kids, you know, we would always end up laughing. I mean, with, you know, he'd put a little stage of something on in at the house, or we'd enact something together, something like from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, or we'd all have to dress up as different little characters, and he would direct us, and we'd all fall about laughing. And his favourite record then was the Thunder and Lightning Polka, and that crashing sound, you know, that was him. Oh, you know, and we'd all laugh a lot and be throwing ourselves about, and he was so easy in his own skin, I think, especially towards the end of his life. I mean, and he was so confident. And, you know, I used to walk around London with him when, you know, and I just, the way that he just walked, it just exhumed confidence all the while, you know. I mean, he was so just great to be around. You never felt he was being pretentious, or, you know, he was just a great guy. And I mean, you know, Kenneth Halliwell called him Mr. Twinkle. Not Kenneth Halliwell, sorry. Kenneth Cranham called him Mr. Twinkle, because he said whenever he came in, he was like, he made you twinkle, he made you shine, he made you feel good about yourself, you know. And that really was Joe. I mean, he had no problems in asserting himself at where his plays were concerned. If he didn't like a director, or the way a director was seeing his play, he in no uncertain terms would tell him, you know. So he was very confident in that way, and I think that, but not ever arrogant, or, you know, he was just perfect. Oh, no, that's what I aspired to be, and I'm 76 this year. I've not achieved it yet.
Go back to that. Joe was friends with Kenneth Williams. Famously, they went to Morocco together. Tangiers, sorry. And there's a wonderful interview with Kenneth Williams, who often performs when he's doing interviews. But there's a marvellous bit where he comes out and is Kenneth Williams halfway through, and he says Joe was funny, and as in fun to be around. And I thought that was a marvellous thing to say about somebody. Yeah.
Did you want me to repeat that? Do you?
Oh yes. If you could, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, with Joe's character, you know, he sort of, when he met Kenneth Williams, I mean, Kenneth Williams had this wonderful voice, didn't he? And he was wonderful on the radio. I thought Kenneth Williams was, like, round the horn and that. And then, you know, when they got together, I mean, even Kenneth Williams said that he was such fun. Joe was such fun to be around, and that Joe was very funny. And he was. I mean, you see, whereas probably Kenneth Halliwell was more dour and more sort of, oh, everybody wants Joe. And as Kenneth Williams said, yes, everybody did want Joe, because Joe was fun to be around, and he never put any sort of restrictions on you, or never sort of expected you to behave in any way particularly, just be yourself. And as Joe said, you know, he said to Kenneth Williams, you shouldn't worry about being a homosexual. You shouldn't worry about it. Don't let that worry you. Just get yourself anything you want. Get yourself fucked as often as you can, and don't worry about what other people think. You know, and I think Kenneth Williams really appreciated Joe for that, but he couldn't have done it. He couldn't have put that into operation, you know. I mean, he just was a totally different man to Joe, where Joe was, you know, did a lot of the, you know, I think that he was confident in not just his writing and confident in the way he saw life or viewed life, but he was also confident within his sex as well. I mean, he had no problems in picking up blokes and that, and didn't think he even thought twice about it. I suppose he must have sometimes wondered he didn't want to get caught in the act, specifically because, you know, it was illegal. But of course, when he died in 1967, it was the Wolfenden report deemed that it wasn't illegal between consenting males consenting homosexuals over the age of 21. So
I checked that out this morning. I think the royal assent came through about 13 days before Joe died. It was very close at the time. I'm aware of overburdening you with stuff, but are you happy to carry on, or did you want a drink of something?
No, I'm all right.
The rest of it's quite quick. I just want to talk briefly about the film, and then go on to the funeral, and then how your life changed after that.
Yeah.
That's really where we're up to, and then okay. 1987, Stephen Frears directed an Alan Bennett scripted film called Prick Up Your Ears, and it's a brilliant film. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, eventually the biography that John Law wrote, Prick Up Your Ears, got made into a film. Alan Bennett did the film script, and Stephen Frears directed. Yeah, with Gary Oldman and Fred Molina as Joe and Kenneth. I remember going to the premiere of that, and Stephen Frears was there, and I think Stephen Frears was just terrified of what the family thought, and he got blind drunk, and it was funny. That was, Stephen Frears is, just the bee's knees as far as I'm concerned in directing. In fact, Francis Barber, who played me, said you'd work for Stephen Frears for nothing. But I don't... Sorry. I will go and get some water in a minute. Okay. Stephen Frears... I felt that I see that the Joe I saw on screen, if you like, Gary Oldman's portrayal of Joe, wasn't like the Joe I knew. But I think they got the essence of him. This sort of... He came over as too much like Jack the Lad to me, where Joe wasn't that type. But he did have this amazing confidence and in his own abilities. And that did come out, I think, later on. I don't know, and I do think towards the end of the film, where that Kenneth is sort of getting more and more morose, and they show Joe, seemingly not bothered about it, the way that Kenneth is declining. I think, I feel that I don't think Joe loved Kenneth Halliwell. I don't think that for 1 minute. But he really, and I mean really, respected Kenneth's judgment, Kenneth's editing, Kenneth's input. Joe really respected that, and he trusted it too. So there was a special relationship there. But I don't think he really enjoyed having sexual relationships with Kenneth Halliwell. Well, he says so in his diary. So the film, as far as I'm concerned, is a film that you undoubtedly would become a classic, and it has, and rightly so. But it's bound to be different to me. It's bound not to be the Joe I knew or the John I know, and that's all really. I mean, everything else. I mean, I didn't think. You see, again, I didn't think. I thought Fred Molina really was nothing like Kenneth. I don't know. It's all in the casting. You get the casting right. It's the same with all the plays. Like that I've seen so many of Joe's plays, and sometimes the casting is dreadful, and therefore the play fails. But if the casting's right, it's just wonderful. I saw the most amazing loot at the Park Theatre, directed by Michael Fentiman. And, it was, there's some moments when you think, yes, this is what it's about. This is bloody wonderful. And it was just, it's like, I could have gone to see that production every night of the week. It was wonderful. I don't know. I must have seen it. I must have gone. It was only on for 3 weeks, I think. I think I went about 6 times to see it. No, it was fabulous.
Marvellous. Back to the film. It's very strong 2 performances of that, and it's a very likeable film. It's got a lot of joy in it. There's a lot of darkness in it. It's quite claustrophobic, and it's just a wonderful piece. However, it really is. But when sometimes you see somebody on television or something, you turn and you think, that's just how somebody was. Do you ever think that about anybody on television or films about Joe or Kenneth for that matter? You think, that's...
I don't think so. Sorry, I don't think I can answer that, because I can't think of anybody that would prompt me to say that is just like Joe. Is that what you mean?
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's only those 2 clips of him on television, aren't there? And he comes on, particularly that not a game show, but I can't remember what it's called. But
the Eamon Andrews chat show, yeah.
And then he's got this real presence about him. This sort of quiet confidence, mischievousness, and
that's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I think Joe's at his best just before he dies. I mean, on the Eamon Andrews show, he comes out, and I think he'd probably popped a couple of Librium or Valium or something, I don't know. But he was quite outrageous on that show as well, about saying that as far as sex is concerned, about marriage. I think it was more about marriage than anything. But he said, I wouldn't want to stay married. He said, you give the baby a same rattle every day, it'll soon start throwing it out of its pram. And then he said, about women, and he had the most awful, I won't repeat it, the most awful suggestion about how to deal with women. But having said that, I think he was doing it deliberately. He was being deliberately mischievous. I mean, there was this impishness about him that you thought, you bugger, you. I know what you're doing, And when I watch it now, when he first comes out, it always brings a lump to my throat. But then when he starts to talk, and I think, oh, Joe, you're outrageous. You're just being outrageous. It's almost like, Salvador Dali in his paintings. He's really being outrageous and poking fun, and I think that's what Joe's doing. I mean, I don't think he deliberately means half what he says in that programme, but I mean, he just likes to provoke you in a way. But I mean, I just think he has a lovely line in one of his interviews where he says, "But I make you laugh to make you see. Surely there's salvation in that." And I think, yeah, that, you know, his plays are very dark, but dark in a way that is illuminating, because you learn something about yourself, all that hypocrisy in Lou, you know. I mean, saying things like, "Oh, we must marry." Then when Faye the nurse says, "Oh, we must marry," you know, and keep up appearances, and yet she's killed 7 husbands. I mean, I love all that hypocrisy stuff, and Joe did too, I think. He said, you know, we're all humans, we're all acting certain ways, and we try to cover it. We try to cover it up. I mean, Jane Austen does that in all her books, doesn't she? She just very, very finely points out the hypocrisy in human nature. I think it is human.
Yeah, it's all the clothes we wear and put more clothes on, and it's like onions. I'm going to pause it there because
after Joe's death. Then we had the funeral, and that was quite an Orton-esque funeral, because it was just full of theatrical people, and Harold Pinter and Donald Pleasance gave a speech. Both read poems, and then the coffin sort of really judded about on these rollers and didn't move. And so everybody was like on tenterhook thinking, "Oh, it's going to fall off." So when we got outside, Peggy Ramsey, Joe's agent, said, "Oh, wasn't that awful?" She says, "But Joe would have loved it, wouldn't he? It was so like Joe." And so after that, we just headed back to Leicester. And after the funeral, we headed back to Leicester. And then it went to the courts and all that, because Joe had left his will in favour of Kenneth, and Kenneth had left his will in favour of Joe, and but because of certain technicalities, like Kenneth Halliwell could not have inherited anyway. You can't gain through murder. And also because I think Joe was still alive. They estimated that, actual fact, Kenneth Halliwell died first, because Joe was clearly unconscious, but he died later, not probably an hour later. So anyway, the estate, the Joe Orton estate, eventually came to my father. My mother was already dead. Came to my father, and we went to court, and the will then was divided up, or the estate and the royalties and any monies was divided between 4 of us, which was my father and my brother Douglas, and my sister Marilyn and myself. And so subsequently we came into a bit of money. I mean, but every year, because Joe's plays have always been popular, over the years, we've always had a certain amount of a beneficiary payout, and I suppose for the first time in my life, I really didn't have to worry about going out to work to help keep the family and a roof over our heads and food in our stomachs. So it gave me that wonderful thing called time. Time to get educated for a start. 32. I went to the Wigston College of Further Education and took 6 O-levels. I think I failed geography, but I passed the other 5. And then I went on eventually and worked with the Leicester University Library. And did an Open University degree. And all the time I'm thinking about, I'm sort of jotting down memories of what it was like to live in this household with Elsie and Bill Orton and my siblings, and occurrences with Joe or John and Marilyn and Dougie, and the things we did together, and the library visits, all the different things you do, like swimming in the canal, and all we kids did then. I don't do it now, of course. And bike rides and stuff like that. And I just, whenever I thought of or had a memory, then I'd get my notebook out and I'd quickly scribble it down. So by the time I'd sort of reached, 2000, I'd got quite a lot of notes, a ton of notes. And I started to put it together with the help of a very good friend of mine, Marilyn Ritchie, who is lovely and very kind person. And she said, "You write it down and I'll edit it." And so that's what she and I did. Where do you want me to go now?
Right, okay, so at that point, so you've got the degree is...
I left George.
Yes, we need to talk a little bit about relationships. I don't know if we want to talk about the dating and that. So a bit about the dating, and then to sum up your achievements, personal and academic, as we reach the present day, and a little bit about what happened to your family, as all your siblings, where they scattered to. Just a brief thing on that. And then we move into your life now and local involvement with the North Norfolk area with NAB and those kind of things. I keep mentioning the book now and again because this the book title. So we're at, you've decided to change your life, educated. Now it's about relationships and where that went.
Yeah, and then after just going through doing 6 years with the Open University and eventually getting a degree, and I don't know, it does really sort of bring into focus what sort of life you're living. And really, George and I really were worlds apart. I mean, we didn't even have we never slept together, never had separate rooms downstairs and upstairs. And in the end, I just said to him, this marriage of ours, it's dead. Why don't we just bury it? And, just split up. I mean, I weren't bothered about a divorce, to be honest, but I just wanted and then, of course, what the male response is, who is he? And I said, no, look, don't go there, because I don't want another fella. And I said, I just don't want to live with you. I don't want to go into retirement with you. That's it. So anyway, we split up. He bought a house. I stayed in the house I had. We both lived in, and then he moved out, which was okay really, because all he did really was just, everything was sport with George, everything. I mean, You know, he never did anything in the house. He never, you know, he didn't even put a picture on the wall or mend a fence. Every time I wanted anything doing, it was, well, get somebody in then. You know, there was no relationship there. We were both in this rowing boat, and he was going one way and I was rowing the other, so it was never going to go anywhere. Anyway, enough said that we split up. And then unfortunately for him, he contracted lupus. And he was about 18 months. And he was really, really poorly, really unwell. And I sort of mucked in and visited him in hospital. I mean, you know, the milk of human kindness sort of does inevitably run through your veins. I mean, I felt really, really sorry for George. I mean, he was so unwell. But anyway, in the end, he died. And this chap at his funeral came up to me and he said, oh, George was such a good golfer. He said what did he play off? He must have played off about 4 or 5. He was such a good golfer. And I looked at this guy and I said, he should have been. He did fuck all else. And this guy sort of then just thought, oh dear. I thought, you don't know what people's lives are like. You know, I mean, okay, maybe he was a good golfer, but enough said, I think. And then sort of after about a couple of years, I thought it might be an idea to sort of try and see if I could make it work again. Did I want to go through the rest of my life, because I was barely 50, without a partner? And I thought, well, I'll have a go at this online dating stuff. And, it was hilarious. And then you could have this, you also had this telephone dating thing whereby you could leave your sort of voicemail saying sort of what sort of person you were looking for and how old you were, and that, you know, you basically, you know, whatever, your basic details and that. And I just left this message. And it was damned expensive, because I think it was about a pound to listen to your replies. £1 a minute or something like that. So it was damned expensive. And I thought, oh, well, I'll maybe just get 2 or 3 replies. And I got 29. So, and I kept just, I mean, some of the replies were just absolutely, I just fell about laughing. You know, I got these sort of replies like, hello, me duck. I'm an ex-fireman, and I'll go up your ladder any time you like. I thought, no, but you had this facility where you could play fast forward, so you could get rid of it straight away. Delete it. So, you get these things like, and I've just mentioned one, but, people would sort of say, I hope you cook like Delia Smith and fuck like a rabbit. And you think, what? I don't think. And then, people leave the most outrageous replies. All you really want is for someone to say hello and my name's so and so and I'm a a court judge or and I like dressing up in women's clothes. I like the suspenders. No, I mean, I just think that, I don't know what men think. I I can't. I have major problems really with, not major problems, but I just think, I don't know why you would think I would want to meet you for, and then this other guy sort of left a message saying, oh no, I met this guy once. I met a guy once in a pub, and I said to him, he says to me, would you like something to eat? And I said, no, thank you. I ate before I came out. And he says, well, I'm going to have a corned beef cob. And I'm thinking to myself, are you really offering me a corned beef sandwich? And, oh, gee. And then, it's just, they don't even ask you what you really enjoy doing or anything. I mean, I met a man once in a pub, and he never asked me once what I enjoyed doing. He just talked totally about himself. And then, would you believe it, he showed me a picture of his ex-wife and saying that she was a clairvoyant. And then I'm thinking, well, she perhaps saw you doing this then. I don't know. I just thought it's a pity, she was some sort of, just things they do. And they used to play the Ouija board, him and his wife. And apparently, he said, and I started to giggle. And he says, oh, you might scoff. He says, but he says, I had to ask it a question that only I would know the answer to. He said, and I asked it, what was the name of my hamster? And I'm thinking to myself, I've got to write this down when I get home. I mean, it's just wonderful stuff. I mean, Bridget Jones's Diary and all that sort of stuff, and all those things where the dating agencies come in. I mean, whatever I read, if ever I read anything that seemed outrageous, it would be true. I'd think to myself, that really happened, because it happened to me. I mean, it's just, and people that left replies saying, hello, love, I'm disabled. I'm a little bit disabled, but I can still work in bed. I think, is that all that bothers you? I mean, you're interested in anything bloody else than getting yourself under somebody's skirt. But then I had this letter, because you could reply by letter to a box. I had this letter from this guy in Nottingham. And the letter was, I had letters come through to me on bits of on the backs of envelopes. And you think, what, can you even take the time to go and get a pad and a proper envelope? But no, I had this quite long hand letter from this guy in Nottingham who said he lived in Greece. And that his daughter had recently had a child. And that he wanted to spend more time back in England. And he was hoping that to meet someone. He was divorced and he was hoping to meet someone. And so I met him in Nottingham, and that was John, and I knew straight away, almost immediately, that he was a different guy altogether. And, we sort of got together, and we lived in Greece partly and partly in England. We lived in England in the winter months and Greece in the summer months, which was ideal, really. And then we only had 6 years together, and it was sort of, we were very happy together, John and I. It was just, but the problem was that John got cancer, bowel cancer, and died. And then since then I've not bothered. I'm not bothered to sort of go any further with fellas, and which I'm quite content with. There's something to be said for living on your own and having your own, doing exactly what you like, you know. If you just want beans on toast for your tea, or if you just want to do absolutely nothing but eat bloody chocolates for an hour or two, then no, there's no one that says, that'll make you ill or whatever, you know. No, so yeah, I'm fine on my own. I really am. I enjoy it, and I enjoy the writing. I'm still writing.
Yeah, that's great. This now move on to what. Yeah, just about your achievements, personal and academic. Is there any way of summing that up, or is there?
Achievements. Yeah.
As we approach the current day, before we move on to what you do in North Norfolk.
Yeah.
Just,
yeah. So, as I said earlier, in 2016, we published my book. I Had It In Me, the memoir, which was very well received, and since then I've been writing short stories, none published, and I mess about with my writing a lot. It's on and off. My problem is I tweak it too much. Instead of just banging it down, I keep going back when I really should. But anyway, I'm hoping that eventually I will possibly finish these short stories, and then also I'd like to. I've been doing a bit of working on the film script for I Had It In Me. I'd like to see if I could get any takers for that. And other than that, really, it's I do some volunteering work for the Norfolk and Norwich Blind Association. I've been doing that now for it must be the best part of 8-9 years. I run the book club at Cromer Library, and it's we read a lot of different types of books, and we go through them. They're a jolly lot, and I read them, of course, but they listen to the calibre recordings of whatever book that's been chosen. I don't choose the books. The books come through from Calibre. And every month we meet and we have a jolly good discussion about what we've just read, whether we like it or not, and whether we thought it was a good plot or whatever, you know. But no, I enjoy working for the Norfolk and Norwich Blind Association. We used to also run they used to run a sort of monthly meeting for the Blind Association members at Holt, in their community centre there. But it's the problem is with anything that's volunteered, it's difficult to get volunteers to just to do it, and the same people do it year in, year out, and then they say, you know, I've had enough now, I've been doing it for X number of years, and I want to break from it, or I'm just getting too old to do it, and nobody else really wants to take it on. It's terrific, I think, you know, that it's a well established charity. And it's a pity that we can't get more people to volunteer, really. It's very rewarding. I find it very rewarding.
Is there someone they could get in contact with if there are any volunteers?
Oh, yeah. If you want to volunteer, I'm not sure who the volunteering officer is, but the person I always contact at Norfolk and Norwich, at Magpie Road in Norwich, is a guy called Mark Smith, and he organises the library meetings. So if anybody does want to volunteer, or even come to the Cromer group, you know, I mean, obviously, you would have to be a member of the Norfolk and Norwich Blind Association, but if you'd like to come along, we'd welcome you with open arms. Really, I mean, it's lovely to have new members and have a bit of new input into what you're reading. But no, it's a fine charity, and I just think that it's a pity that they can't get more people.
Mm. Yeah, that's a common problem. You know, my Deb's mum and dad, they sort of run stuff, and it is the volunteering thing is a constant thing. And just to tell me, just to sum up, what you enjoy about life in North Norfolk, really.
What I enjoy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, moving out here to North Norfolk, I get a lot of I get a lot of pleasure out of I just love the garden. I love my garden. I love, obviously, walking the dogs. And I enjoy reading a lot. I do, and I write every day. The rest of the family here are vegan, and I'm about halfway there. I don't eat very much meat, but I don't think I'd give it up totally. And I do eat chicken, more often chicken and fish. Chicken are stupid animals, stupid birds they are. I mean, I keep chickens and I know, I mean, I can't imagine how anybody can sort of give them names it's just daft, isn't it? I just feel it's daft. And who wants to love a chicken? unless it's wrapped in some decent sauce.
And of course you're near the seaside here, so it's always very nice to have a wander there.
It is. Yes, the beach here, the beach around this coastline is absolutely wonderful, apart from some of it falling into the sea. But no, it is. It's a wonderful place to live. I never go back to Leicestershire. Give me Norfolk every time. And of course then there's the family come out and see you, and the grandchildren love it because Grandma lives near the seaside, and they come down armed with their buckets and spades, and I've got a shed full of fishing gear and buckets and spades and surfboards and whatever.
Fantastic. Just 3 more questions, if we may. The first one is the Orton legacy. I can't remember what it's called. Not the archive, the estate, and the statue. Probably 2 things to talk about there. Is that okay?
Yeah. So where we stand really with the legacy of Joe is that I think his plays must be his legacy. Because they're so well received, they're so well written. I mean, when you're in the right ballpark when someone like Harold Pinter says to you, he was a bloody marvellous writer. And so many people have. I mean, at the minute, and he's still going. We're talking now 50 odd years since Joe died, and really he only wrote 4 one-acts and 3 three-act plays, and they are still being produced all over the world at some stage. I've just signed a contract for California and one for New York, and I know that Curve in Leicester are planning to do Loot in 2021 to coincide with the unveiling of a statue to Joe that they're hoping to get erected outside the theatre. And so that's all going through at the minute. I mean, the statue is, we managed to raise over £100,000 to get this statue started. So all we do, not all, but what we have to do now is send out the brief to people, to sculptors, and also to anyone really that wants to put in a design not too controversial. Well, can I say, I personally think it has to be quite controversial, because Joe was a controversial writer, and it should reflect the man. I don't think an ordinary statue of Joe, like that of, say, that awful statue of Victoria Wood. I mean, I wouldn't want anything like that. I mean, personally speaking, I'd like a reclining nude. But whether we shall get that, I don't know. But something definitely a bit off, sort of, that reflects him. I mean, I know, and people are constantly asking me now, what would Joe think to a statue of him in Leicester? Well, I think he'd be bloody over the moon about it. That's what I think. Because, you know, he's a working class kid, a raggy-arsed ranger who made it really good and is really a benchmark writer, really important writer. In fact, Lute was voted by the National Theatre as one of the best plays of the 20th century. I mean, that's something, isn't it? You can't take that away from him. I mean, he was proud of that, and rightly so. And I think he would be proud of a statue in Leicester. He'd like the idea that it was a nude, I think. But then I think he might, you know that, I don't know if you know it, but in St Mark's, there's a statue, and the hand is very shiny because of people that hold this, have stroked it over the years. And I think Joe might just end up with a shiny bum. Because I think a lot of people would probably stroke his bum.
Oh, lovely. Leonie Orton, thank you very much. There's just two more things. Once, are you a happy woman?
Oh, always optimistic. I don't think my kids would say that. They'd say, oh, sometimes you can be a grumpy old bugger. And I agree with them. I can't. Sometimes I'm not a nice person to know. But then, you know, who is? Who hasn't got foibles and things that about them that their personality doesn't meet everyone? But I do know that the people I've met here, friends I've made in North Norfolk, always, the nicest compliment I am paid by any of them is, oh, Leonie, yes, she's such good fun to be with. We always have a laugh when Leonie's around. I think that's my legacy.
Fantastic. We're going to just leave on the mystery of the missing pages, because we haven't mentioned that at the moment.
No.
Are you okay to... Sorry, when you go to somebody, I'm used to tapping
Oh,
Debs
don't
on
worry,
the knee.
I'm not going. I won't sue you.
Got me too. I'll go for that. But are you right to do that? But
Yeah.
I don't know how long that'll be, but just...
I'll have to leave at 1:30 though.
Sorry, yes, I do apologise for taking up so much of your time.
No, you've not. It's okay. So you want me to...
Because there's a mystery.
Oh yeah, Going back to the diaries that Joe left behind. In the film Prick Up Your Ears, you see Vanessa Redgrave, who plays the character of Peggy Ramsey, go in and take the diaries. And now Christopher Hampton, who is also a writer and says that he believes that to be true. I think she must, but the problem is with that is that, you know, the coroner must have seen these diaries. And so she must have handed them in at some stage. But what I think, you see, the problem with the note is, the suicide note that Kenneth left behind said, if you read his diaries, all will be explained, P.S., especially the latter part. Now, the latter part, you see, is missing, as is the London diary itself. This London diary that Peggy took was loose leaf, in a loose leaf binder, and it was typed. It wasn't handwritten. And that's gone. It's lost. And we also, but before it was lost, John Law had Peggy gave John Law a typewritten. She typed a new one out, and she gave it to him. So he was working from a sort of an adulterated script, really. So he never, and he almost immediately, realised that this end part that Kenneth Halliwell is talking about is missing. I mean, the last entry in the diary is the 1st of August 1967, and he didn't die until August the 9th. Now, I've got these diaries in printed form, published form, and there is barely a day when Joe goes without writing in this diary. He is a diarist, and he enjoys writing in his diary, and he writes in it every single day. So for him for the last entry to be on the 1st of August and him to die on the 9th of August suggests that there's at least 6 pages or 5 or 6 pages missing, I think, anyway. Because it would never have gone 9 days without writing in his diary. So clearly those pages that are missing, and also it ends in mid-sentence. So clearly these pages are missing. And I done my damnedest to track them down. I've never been able to find them. It's a real mystery. I think it would be wonderful to find them. It just would be the find of the century. Well, for me it would anyway. So, I mean, and I just, as I say in the last few lines of my book, I had it in me, my ears are always in the pricked position. So if anybody found, I'd love to think that they were stuffed in another book somewhere, or or some of the stuff that should be in the Joe Orton archive material was never put into it. In other words, someone got rid of it, and there's only one person that could have done that, and that's Peggy Ramsey. So I think that, and she's been dead a good many years, so I don't think there's any chance of seeing these missing pages in my lifetime. It'd be wonderful if they could be found. But so that's the end of the story, really. That's where I am at the minute with. That's the end of my book, really.
Leonie Orton, an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much for allowing us to take up so much of your time. And hope you carry on being happy in North Norfolk and walking your dogs for as long as you wish.
So do I. I mean, keep going. I mean, I've got to keep going, haven't you?
Yeah, thank you.